Good afternoon, welcome to the House Environment Committee. We are going to be working with S223 version 2.2 with our legislative council.
Good afternoon. This is Mike O'Grady, Legislative Counsel. Before I go into the draft in front of you, I want to address a comment that was made to me after my last testimony on S223. Apparently, when I was testifying on 223, I referenced how Leg Counsel consults with other agencies and other agency staff about questions about rules, et cetera. And I said at that time that agency staff doesn't like it or doesn't like me when I make those questions. Apparently that wasn't taken well. And I didn't mean to direct that at any one particular person or any one particular agency. It's just really, it's kind of my summary of the dynamic that has occurred, you know, in Leg Counsel review of rules over the past, in my experience, 20 years. So I meant no offense. I did not mean to indicate one agency or one person in particular. And I hope that addresses that person's concern. With that said, you have in front of you draft 2.2, April 22nd date with the 2:52 time. And there is new language in this version. It's on page 5. There had been a proposal to set up a program at ANR for certifying wetlands professionals. This doesn't set up the program. It requires ANR to report to you on how they would establish the program. So page 5, line 18, on or before January 15, 2027, ANR submits to you, the General Assembly, a report proposing the establishment of a program to certify wetlands professionals in the state for the purposes of identifying and delineating boundaries. The report shall include a description of the proposed certification program, the proposed requirements for certification, a description of the activities that a wetland professional will be authorized to conduct as part of certification, including whether it's going to be exclusively something that can be done under a certification, what benefit, if any, services from a certified wetlands professional will provide to customers or in regulatory proceedings, and a summary of the benefits and disadvantages of a wetland certification program, including whether it could accelerate wetlands permitting, reduce the amount of wetland services available, increase the cost of wetland services, or delay the permitting process. And then in developing the report, the agency shall consult with persons with knowledge of wetlands permitting and services provided by wetlands professionals. So that isn't limited to just wetlands professionals. It could be developers. It could be other agency staff. It could be just people like the U.S. Corps of Engineers. It could be anybody with that broad knowledge. And those are the only changes from the previous draft.
Just take testimony from wetlands delineator. And she, I think, made only the suggestion that this would include, this report back would include wetlands professionals. Okay, did I miss anything else? Or miss anything?
I'm sorry, I get the air purifier, but
Hi, yeah, maybe medium.
I mean, I don't mean to turn it off because it does smell like cat food in here.
Does smell like cat food, yeah. There is about to have a cat. Anyway, I was just saying, we heard testimony from a wetlands delineator earlier today, and I think this recommendation she made was that folks who already are doing this work be part of the process, which I think is covered in what you have presented us. And I was asking members if they heard anything else from Dory Barton. She brought up an interesting point about liability and the way this was structured. And I guess I would like your thoughts on this, which is currently, she explained that well, first of all, she explained that when she became, on the approved list, to get on the approved list, she had to do 3 different delineations that were then gone through, walked on in the field with A&R staff, and that was still a process that was happening now. But then, in her perception, having a certification program where delineators were the ones signing off on the delineation also put them in the position of being liable. Whereas today, the way the process works, A&R signs off on it, and then having A&R sign off on it gives the landowner assurances that there is, yes, indeed, wetlands delineation approved by the agency. So are we opening the door to A, wetlands consultants needing more liability coverage, and A&R kind of coming back in the future and saying, oh, this delineation wasn't correct after the fact?
I think it depends on how the program gets established. If you're going to have, or who qualifies for certain levels of certification. For example, in the current wastewater potable water supply, those licensed designers can submit, and the agency can rely on those licenses or those certifications for permits. Now, the agency says that they review almost every one of those permits because of their concerns about compliance. But those entities, they're either licensed engineers or they go through an OPR process where they become a licensed designer. So they have that certification and they have insurance that's attached to that. And if they violate the rules in their certification, then they put their licenses at jeopardy. And it says that in the A&R rules. But if you set up a program where the certifier is only given deference, you know, they're going to be given, they go through a program, they're certified, they're on a list. When they certify a wetlands delineation, they're given deference or a rebuttable presumption that they're correct. And A&R still needs to issue that permit. I don't see much liability changing in that instance. So it really depends on what A&R comes forward with it for purposes of this program. And maybe they could do it in tiers. Maybe if you're not licensed engineer, then you only get deference. But if you are a licensed engineer, hydrogeologist, et cetera, you potentially get to self-certify with the condition that if you are in violation, that they might bring a claim against your license.
Representative Nora.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just wondering if we could just add that liability discussion to the criteria that we're asking. I think so.
I was thinking. Yeah, like a clarifying point.
Yeah, right. Because it's very important.
Is very important. And having been in a new field, which this arguably isn't, sometimes it can be very hard to get insurance coverage, and the state requires it, and can be prohibitively expensive or in fact impossible. Yeah. So Representative Chapin.
I'm just curious, the way this section is created, for me, it reads like we expect a certification program. A little different than if we put section 5 at the top and said, explore the pros and cons of a wetland certification program. And if you're recommending this, then include XYZ. So it's just sort of a, personally, I might prefer to change that around and not make the assumption clearly that we're looking to establish a program. But my question for you really is around whether something like this would then go through rulemaking, because I guess I'm not only want wetland delineators, the 25 of them that we have currently in the state, to be involved and give input, but I think we'd want significant input if they're about to be sort of regulated in a different way. And we just really don't want to lose a bunch of, like, we don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot on trying to improve the process when it could, you know. So the question is about rulemaking versus when we put something like this that says the report shall include like how you would do this program. To me, that means we're going to just dump that into a statute and do it statutorily versus be like, you shall create a certification program and you'll go through rulemaking. So I'm just curious about how you would see this play out.
I think there are alternatives and variables. For example, if you say if A&R comes back and says it should be an OPR regulated program, you have to set up a structure around that. You have to set up a OPR board for that, specific to that profession. You have to provide who's going to be on the board. You have to provide what the certification requirements are going to be. And usually most of that is done with a directive for rulemaking. You tell OPR to do it, but you give them directive on what those rules should address. But you could just do it in statute as well if it came forward and it was something that you didn't think needed rulemaking. You could do it in statute. I wouldn't assume that whatever is reported is something that you would quote unquote dump into statute. I mean, the process is as vigorous as it is, and I think you would probably review whatever is proposed to determine if it needs change or amendment, et cetera, alteration. And then the regulated community is obviously going to have input or an opinion, and they will likely want changes because they usually do.
So how we structure this section doesn't necessarily predetermine any of that.
No, but I take your point. It says they shall propose the establishment of a program and should, instead of saying recommend how to establish or whether or how to establish. And that I can change that language if you would rather have that language.
Yeah, I think whether, I like the idea of starting with 5 as well. And saying whether to establish at the beginning or under A now. Really, we're asking them to do an evaluation of whether it makes sense to do this.
So yeah, you could just do it in tiers. So the first subsection would be report back whether and how to establish a program, including a summary of the benefits and disadvantage of the program, including whether it could accelerate wetlands permitting, et cetera. And then new subsection B, if the agency recommends the establishment of a program under subsection B, a description of the program, the proposed requirements, a description of the activities. So you're not predetermining that there's going to be a program, or it looks much less like you are.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Along those lines, we had also, one of the other sections of the amendment was the general permit. We weren't even necessarily, I don't think, predetermined toward a certification program, like maybe a general permit. We don't even know what the problems 100% are sitting here today. I mean, maybe they know better, and it might not be a certification program that solves some of those problems. Maybe it's a general permit program or something different. So I don't know if you want to open it up even broader to consider things other than just a certification program, but maybe a general permit program or other potential solutions to achieve efficiency, speed things up. I don't know, just throwing that out there.
Representative Chapin.
I mean, I think we decided that they have the authority to
That they already have.
propose a permit program at any time and to move in that direction, possibly even without our action. So I guess I feel like keeping this narrow makes sense, and they can come back with that. And the report could say, now that we've looked at this in more depth, here are the biggest issues that are constraining. I think they have all the flexibility to do that in this or separately.
Representative Austin.
Do you think it would be possible to put someone on from the Lake Champlain Advisory Council? Just, no?
I mean, what's the perspective you're trying to,
Well, it's about lakes, you know, and from, you know, Champlain is so,
oh, you're talking about the underlying bill, not what we're talking about now?
right.
Oh,
I'm sorry, I thought we had,
sorry, yes. Let's finish the conversation
Okay.
about section 3.
sorry.
Representative Chapin.
I would also like to spell out that in developing in this, I think it's actually not just the report, but in what will become subsection A of looking at the pros and cons of a certification program, I think it should just say, shall consult with current wetlands delineators utilized by the agency as well as other persons with knowledge. I just don't want to leave it
Yeah, be
up to
specific,
them.
right?
I mean, I trust that they would do that, but I think it's important enough to
Yeah.
spell out.
Knowledge of wetlands permitting and service. Yes, I think that's true. Like the actual consultants doing the work.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think we should add that, something in here about liability. In that pros and cons section, not in,
Yeah, so Michael, how would you word the liability? We would like agency to tell us what they're imagining, because you said it's kind of like how they're imagining this thing, or how they decide to implement it, that will just determine.
Well, if you want it, as Rep. Chapin just asked for in that first, the pros and cons, you could say a summary of the benefits and disadvantages, including whether or not certification. I'm trying to think of the proper verb. Creates or alters liability of a wetlands delineator in performing the functions and services of their profession. Yeah.
Impacts the liability.
or just.
Changes the liability.
How it impacts. the-
Yeah, how it impacts it, how it impacts.
All right, any other thoughts on this section? Okay, so Representative Austin was looking at the list of groups involved in the working group. So currently we have the Secretary of Natural Resources and a DEC scientist. 12 people on here already.
And 2 would be representing nonprofit environmental advocacy groups, which the Lake Champlain Basin Program is an obvious possible.
Yeah. It's just such a huge body of water. You know, it's just a really large body of water, and I just feel that someone who is on like the Lake Champlain Advisory Council should be kind of bringing the lake's perspective, that lake perspective, and into this conversation.
Michael, what is the classification of Lake Champlain? Like, I'm guessing it's a drinking water source, but it's
B.
B. Yeah. It's probably not going to A, Sarita.
Okay.
Sorry. It's a great future. Yeah.
There are, because it's managed by segments and not as a whole, there are segments that are of higher quality, but on the whole, it's a B.
Are there segments that are A? Be surprised.
I think it's all B.
I'd be surprised.
But there,
Reason B.
Not to be.
There, I can't remember where it is.
Used to have C.
There's somewhere around the islands on the west side of the islands that's supposed to be higher quality. But I can't remember.
Do a field trip. At any rate, there's already 12. Are you suggesting?
So, just to clarify, this group will not be looking, Lake Champlain will not be in this conversation this week to look at a degradation of waters.
Well, I mean, they're looking at anti-degradation policy kind of writ large, but in particular, it's the Class A waters that we're considering and yes, lakes and ponds, but I think it's lakes and ponds that are currently A, but not, their designations are not getting changed. So very high water quality lakes. Right, no offense to your lake.
What?
It's our lake.
It's our lake.
It's not sweet.
Anyway,
Might be our only lake.
No.
I consider it mine.
any other thoughts on this section of the bill? So we just have to decide and ask Michael about your time. I suppose we should ask you to redraft section 3. Put you on the spot a little and see how long that might take you.
I could probably go do it right now.
Okay.
I don't have to be anywhere until 3:15.
That would be great. Do you mind doing that?
No.
So half an hour? Reconvene in